Bible in a minute. Genesis 41. And so if you haven't caught what I've talked about, you need to go back and at least watch the last video, because chapter 40 ends with the chief cupbearer having his dream interpreted by Joseph and being restored. The interpretation comes true, but he forgets Joseph. In verse 1, 2 years pass between the time that Joseph interprets the dream and the cupbearer is restored and the time that Pharaoh has a dream. Now, we see that he has a dream and he summons all of his magicians and they cannot interpret the dream. Remember what Joseph said in chapter 40, verse 8, don't dream interpretations belong to God. So the chief magicians cannot interpret this dream. But the cupbearer remembers. He remembers Joseph. And he said, hey, there was a young man in prison with us, a Hebrew. He interpreted my dream and it came to pass, and the baker's dream, and you killed him, so his dream came to pass too. I was restored to my office. The baker was hanged. And it was exactly the way it was we dreamt and the way it was interpreted. And so Joseph is called before Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says, hey, I've heard you can interpret dreams. Joseph very humbly says, it isn't me. God, Adonai, will give Pharaoh an answer that will set his mind at peace. So then Pharaoh tells him his dreams. And basically, and Joseph interprets it. It's going to be 7 years of abundance, 7 years of famine. And the famine is going to be so severe that people will forget all about the abundance, because they'll be starving, like they'll be desperate for food. Because God has given you the same dream, the same interpretation, basically twice, two dreams, but they mean the same thing. It means that he intends to do it soon, shortly. And so Pharaoh is like, dude, this guy, he's got wisdom. And so let's, the Spirit of God lives in him. He actually renames him Zaphnath Paneah, which is a fun word to say, but it means the living God speaks. And so he recognizes that the Spirit of the living God lives inside of Joseph. Now, this is incredible. Where is Joseph? Egypt. What is their theology? Very much polytheistic. They believe in multiple gods, so many gods, Horus and Set and Anubis and all of these different gods that they believe in. And yet this Egyptian Pharaoh recognizes that what Joseph can do, his magicians couldn't do. And so the Spirit of the living God is inside of Joseph. And so he elevates Joseph from the prison to be the prime minister of all of Egypt, and only Pharaoh himself will not be subject to Joseph. Everyone else in Egypt will do exactly what Joseph says to do. He says in verse 41, here, I place you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. But really think about it. Was Pharaoh really placing Joseph in charge? Honestly, it was God. God had set Joseph up from the very beginning, from the time he was thrown in the pit, all the way to being falsely accused in Potiphar's house, to be in the prison when the cupbearer and the baker got there so that he could interpret their dreams, so that when Pharaoh had a dream, Joseph could be summoned from the prison and interpret his dream. And boom, now he is the prime minister of Egypt. Pharaoh didn't make Joseph the prime minister. God did. God set all that up. And then Pharaoh gave Joseph a wife, a new name, a wife. And then the chapter ends with 2 sons being born to Joseph during their abundance, Manasseh and Ephraim, because God has made him forget all of his troubles, and God has made him fruitful in the land of his misfortune. That's what those 2 names mean. And then the famine struck. In the end of chapter 41, the famine struck, and everyone throughout the land of Egypt needed food, and God had set Joseph up. And so when the Egyptians come to Pharaoh, Pharaoh says, go to Joseph. So it's beautiful. It's painful to see the things that Joseph went through, but also it's beautiful that God set that up to elevate him and to bless him, to put him exactly where he needed in exactly the right time, because that was not only going to help the Egyptians survive, but it was going to help Jacob and his other sons and their families survive the famine as well. And that's what we'll see in the rest of the book of Genesis.